California. House Majority Whip Kevin McCarthy joins us. Your thoughts tonight, sir, on two being put on administrative leave?
Yes. The one thing I see, this is going to continue to grow. There's much more. To me, it's a cultural problem at the IRS. And the one thing you see is not just those two employees. Think about what they go before everybody. We're now hearing that this isn't just the direction of Cincinnati looking over, that they were now telling, IRS agents are telling us that Washington was sending them some direction on who to investigate. So I believe this is going to continue to grow. To get to the bottom of this, I think you're going to have a fundamental cultural change inside the IRS.
Well, the Wall Street Journal printing tonight or publishing tonight that a lawyer at the IRS in Washington was actually the one helping them with the questions. A lawyer
that Cincinnati says that they don't have the direction to look in. So they had to ask Washington for guidance, and they were directing them on what to do. To me, that is so unacceptable. And when you think about what transpired in Anaheim at that $4 million convention, and think for a moment when the IRS comes in and audit businesses, and think of the action that the IRS was doing, and that they go through these businesses and say their production of what they do is unacceptable. To me, there's so much more to look at.
Well, you talk about culture, and the IRS says it needs guidelines. Frankly, I'm stunned that anyone would need guidelines to know that this would be inappropriate to do, any of this stuff.
Well, what's even more compelling to me is when this was all going on, why didn't a whistleblower come forward? Why didn't one person in the IRS say, hey, this was wrong? I mean, we found it in other agencies they do that, but why in the overall IRS nobody said anything? That, to me, shows that the entire agency needs it turned around.
Stand by, Congressman. Now to the $64,000 question. Who approved the IRS spending $64,000 of your tax money on gifts, toys, for employees attending the California conference? Griff Jenkins spoke with Congressman Mike Turner about the very expensive swag bag.
Well, over $64,000 was spent on items, promotional items, for the IRS employees that attended, like this bag. It says "Leading into the Future." You know, all this was part of the environment in which they threw a $4 million party for themselves.
Leading into the future.
Yeah, leading into the future, teamwork in action, your leadership journey, all about you know, our tax dollars being spent in inappropriate ways.
And we know this is a nice leather bag or case. Where's some of this stuff made?
Well, this one's made in China. Many of these things were made in China, so they were not even buying American. But you know, it shows that this was a party. They threw themselves a $4 million party. And
do we know about how much these things cost that we have on the table here?
Well, the swag bag items were around $64,000, or about 3,000 of these promotional items that were given, in addition to the lavish suites, the parties that were thrown.
Congressman, we want to ask you, in this Inspector General report here, we see, in addition to the items given here in the swag bag, as we call it, various promotional items totaling approximately $27,000 were provided. We've seen the footnote. These items were purchased by the Human Capital Office for approximately $730 and were given to attendees at the Information Quarter as well as during a conference workshop. They consisted of various items including keychains, plastic coins, miniature stuffed animals, and plastic squirting fish. This fish is not from the conference. It's very similar to the ones given out. We assume it's roughly 3,000, which is the number of attendees. I ask you, sir, what in the world does an IRS employee need with a plastic squirting fish?
I don't know, maybe this represents the fishy things that were going on at the IRS. This is outrageous. I mean, it just shows, obviously, these people were attending a party, and they used taxpayers' dollars to throw it.
Tomorrow, the House Oversight Committee holds a hearing on the lavish IRS spending. But for a majority of Americans, the IRS scandal is raising doubts about the overall honesty of the Obama administration. According to a new Wall Street Journal NBC News poll, 55% of Americans say the IRS targeting scandal raises some level of doubt about the administration's honesty and integrity. Congressman McCarthy, your thoughts, and I don't know if this is just simply the Obama administration, or this is Washington, this is the culture.
This is the culture. Think about it for a moment. They are holding this $4 million party, giving out swag bags in 2010, in the height of our fiscal challenges. This is what they're doing. Who would ever think this was right? Who would ever think in the process or need a guideline to do it? But what's more important here is when you look at that poll, if I was the president, I'd get a little worried, because maybe he thinks he's holding it as numbers, but look at the independents. Not the Republicans, not the Democrats, the independents. he's in the 20% approval rating in the 20s for approval. More than 59% disapprove. And I think a lot of that goes to the trust. And the trust starts from the very top on the way down. And what is he doing to correct this? He's actually in hiding. And then when you look at what he's doing for appointments today, he's not listening to the American public. If he had nothing to do with it, I'd come forward and say, I want to get to the very bottom and start cleaning house and changing the culture that sits there.
Is it time to ban government conferences? Because this one with the IRS was called Leading into the Future. Now, what in the world does that have to do with the IRS?
I don't see why the IRS needed to go. And think for a moment. The way they contracted, they didn't even go contract and get the best price for a hotel. They were paying the highest price. I think someone was looking for a junket in this process. I think you always need transparency. Well, it's cleaned a lot of this up. I think people do have to meet, people do have to have training, but you have to have a mission why, and you should be very upfront while you're doing it. But no one needs a $4 million conference and swag bags to go out and learn what to do in the IRS.
What's wrong with Skype, online, Google Hangout? There are lots of different ways that don't cost a dime. I mean, the American taxpayers shouldn't have to pay for this. $27,000 for a speech or for a keynote speaker.
Why do they need to pay for a keynote speaker when they're in training? From my point is, they need some ethical training inside to know what is right and what's wrong, and that's why I think you need a fundamental change. You know, I talk to my family more on FaceTime than anywhere else, and I talk to a lot of my constituents that way, and you know what? I do teletown halls. There are ways to have training in a more cost-efficient and reach more people in a way that can work much better than the process that they're doing today.
Why'd the IRS have to hire a lawyer to help them with the scandal? They got a bunch of lawyers there. Why don't they just come forward and tell the truth?
Well, see, that is what shows the character is so wrong. If you go and lawyer up, you're not even admitting to the problem. You're trying to defend yourself or cover something up further. I think the first thing, everything should come out in the open and correct it. And how can you as an IRS agent or sitting there working for the agency not want it to be better? Bring it forward and make the corrections. And I don't believe this is the only agency that needs to be looked at. We're going to find it many different ways. And the one thing that we should hold a commitment as all Americans, when we get through with this, there's going to be a greater accountability and more transparency in government. And at the end of the day, we want to be able to make sure that this government earns the trust of the American people. And the only way to do that is to clean house.
Congressman, thank you.
Thanks for having me.